Okay, as we did in introductions, my name is Justin. This is Noah. We're going to talk about HIPAA compliance in the AWS cloud. First things first, we'll do a couple slides about just who OurHealth is, what we cover, and then we'll go from there. You'll go back real quick. So this is a picture of one of our clinics, if you've not been to one of our clinics. This is kind of what our clinics look like, so they're actually pretty nice facilities. So go ahead and go to the next one. So just a quick agenda. What is OurHealth, what we do, some requirements, the eligible AWS services, responsibility model, all that stuff. So what is OurHealth? Anthony kind of touched on it a minute ago. We basically do healthcare clinics for employers. We have either on-site, near-site, or a kind of a custom hybrid model of the two. Several services that we provide during that, primary urgent care, pediatric urgent care in certain cases. Wellness services is our main area. So to go to do your yearly physical, to do blood work, kind of do a health risk assessment. We do that for employers and for all the employees as well. We do labs on site, certain medications on site as well, also referral services. So our mission is to radically transform the consumer healthcare experience. We do that with three areas: our people, our passion, and our excellence. It's kind of a overarching thing that we've been trying to do, and it's really a neat company to work for. It's a really neat area to get into. It's different than the traditional healthcare model that you've seen before. So where are we? This is just a quick snapshot. The top bar are all Indianapolis clinics or metro area clinics. The bottom half, we kind of did the same model in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we've got clinics around Charlotte as well. Plus we have, that shows 11 clinics there. We actually have 26 total. So we have some dedicated to employers in their location. So it just depends on the customer and all that. And I'll let Noah take it from here.
So I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. So the first thing here really is that we want to help educate you guys, but unfortunately we're not lawyers, and we don't know the ins and outs of your business. So whether it's HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, whatever it may be, this is suggestions. This is based on our interpretation of what AWS says and what HIPAA, the rules and regs say. But we are not lawyers. So if you have any compliance questions, concerns, issues, etc., A, read the rules and regs, and B, if they're difficult to interpret, like they sometimes can be, consult a lawyer that specializes in that space. And with that, the hold harmless, release of liability. We're not liable for anything you do or don't do based on this presentation. So happy to help, happy to provide advice and feedback and talk about what we do, but in reality and in the end of the day, we're not liable for anything that you do or don't do. So take everything with a grain of salt. All right. Yeah, lots of text. So healthcare definitions. Wanted to give a baseline for those that may not be in the healthcare space. We as a healthcare organization, as OurHealth, are falling under two pretty broad stroke healthcare regulations. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and HITECH, which basically gave teeth to HIPAA. HIPAA was set up to basically help digitize and electronicize, if that's even a word, the medical record system. So trying to make it easier to share information between healthcare records and medical organizations. And then really tried to make sure that information, the protected health information, was protected. HITECH came in 2009, and in combination with HIPAA, it really just pushed the envelope from a security and privacy perspective. Both of those together impose requirements related to how we can use and disclose PHI, how we secure it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the basis of that. A couple other definitions: a business associate agreement. And actually, I'm gonna step down a second. That's the next slide. Sorry. So yeah. No, never mind. Two more. Yeah. So I went to the business associate agreement without defining what business associates are. So let me start there, and we'll step back one. Business associates, really, so there's a couple different pieces of terminology within HIPAA or HITECH that's required to kind of understand here. Covered entities. So covered entities are your doctor's office, the hospital you go to. These are places that generate your medical record and in turn generate PHI. They are required to protect that information. So in our organization, we have what's called the OurHealth Physicians Group. That's the group of physicians that performs medical care on your behalf. They are the ones that generate PHI. They are the covered entity. So they're here. And then below that, we have OurHealth, the limited liability corporation, the organization that provides services, basically management services to the organization. That is a business associate. So the covered entity is saying, hey, we generate this PHI, and the business associate says, hey, we're helping you with whatever services you need us to do with that PHI. So in our case, that's managing and running and maintaining clinics. So I wanted to define that. So let's step back a second. So with that said, HIPAA requires covered entities to hold that PHI to a level of security and standard. It also requires the business associate to do that. And it also, on top of that, requires you to have an agreement, a legally binding agreement between the two, and that is a business associate agreement. It's basically saying a very long document just to say, yes, we will protect it the same way you as the covered entity do. So that's the gist of it. So that's the agreement. The BAA also includes subcontractors. So if you happen to be a consulting firm doing work in the AWS space and one of your clients happens to be a healthcare firm, you may want to ensure that you have that provision in place as part of your contracting process. If you don't, be a good thing to look into. I should go back one, sorry. So AWS actually is considered a business associate for us. We provide or we store, transmit, process PHI in AWS. So they are a business associate to us. We have an agreement with them. What is PHI? PHI is any information about the person's health status. Payment for the health services, things like that. Anything collected by that covered entity, like I defined just a little bit ago, that can be linked to a specific person. Basically, the idea is if you can figure out who I am through that data, that's PHI, right? Figure out who I am and my medical condition, that is PHI. So what does HIPAA actually require? Yeah, I didn't want to put about 30 slides in here, so I linked you to both the security rule and the privacy rule. Both of those really go into detail about what you have to do from a privacy and security perspective with patient information and data. But what I did do is I pulled out some pretty big bullet points that you tend to come across when you speak about PHI, and this can be applicable to other areas too. So I keep going back to PCI. I come from a financial services consulting background, so PCI was my bread and butter for a while. PHI has to be encrypted, period, end of story. Can't have that laying around because it's considered insecure if it's not. So transit and at rest, yep. Access to that information has to be logged and monitored. You have to be able to say, this person logged in, checked this patient record, and yep, that was appropriate. They were the person providing care. Or they had access because they're a developer and they're working in the system trying to debug something. You have to be able to work through that kind of flow. BAAs I kind of touched on already, but they must be in place between the covered entity and the business associate, and in certain cases, your subcontractors. So, yes? So the question was from a database perspective, when we're making queries against a database, from a logging and monitoring perspective, what are you doing from there? Yeah, so that's a tough, not necessarily a tough one, but so at least in my case, from what I've seen historically, the system obviously is making the query to the back end to pull information, right? So your front end is querying your back end, but on the front end, you're logging who is the person making that request. Yeah, you have to be able to define what that means, right? And so what we've historically done, and stepping to another level here, we do annual risk assessments where we walk through and look at all the different systems we have in place, the different controls we have in place. And in this case, we had an outside firm come in and do this for us, that they walk through what basically the Office of Civil Rights, which is the enforcement arm of the Health and Human Services, they walk through what would they do in case of an audit? What would they look for? And so they help us walk through all of our different systems, look at all of our different controls, and help us understand where there might be any gaps. So in that case, they look at auditing and logging and monitoring on certain systems. So from a higher level perspective, doing that annual risk assessment, understanding where you might have gaps, that's kind of the approach that we've taken. And then from there, we've built those controls in place for those different systems to log, monitor, and alert on different things as we need to. So does that answer your question? Yes. So the question was, how often do audits occur? This is going to depend on what industry you're in. So we're in healthcare technically. By the government. So in this case, again, with the OCR, so far from what I've seen, they are only doing audits after something has happened. So if you're a hospital system, like out in California, there's been a couple instances where they've been breached. The OCR will come in after the breach and do an assessment and understand where your gaps are. And then they're going to ask some questions. Well, why did this happen? You know, are there any other areas that might cause you more additional risk? How do we prevent it? So that's why when we go through our annual assessments, we look at the OCR's audit criteria and use what they would do as kind of our guide map or roadmap, if you will.
And then another question is I understand if you have application level logging, but what happens if you open like SQL management studio, right? And you
Same.
log in with your credentials.
Yep.
What solution do you have to go and log that someone access that and
Yeah.
log what the reason was for access?
So the question was from like a SQL management perspective. If you have SQL Management Server or SQL Management Studio, and you're logging into the database and accessing it as an administrator, same thing applies. So there's two sides of that coin. One is you're logging who is accessing that. You're taking those logs from that system and centralizing them somewhere, so you have separate access to them, independent access. Secondarily, you're auditing who has access on a frequent basis, quarterly, monthly, whatever it may be, based on risk. You're looking at across the board on all the systems that are relevant. In this case, for HIPAA, we have a good number of them. We go in and audit those on a frequent basis to understand who has access and revoke anybody that doesn't need it. So. It depends, right? So it's based on risk, right? If that query is accessing PHI, most likely needs to be logged, yes. If it's not, depends. Yep.
Does that mean you have to allocate a large budget for just the data storage?
So, yes. So the question was, does that mean you have to allocate a large budget to data storage? In certain cases, yes. I mean, there's, again, I'm not going to speak for everybody's organization here, but from an overall perspective, one of the requirements, or at least a very strong suggestion from a healthcare perspective, HIPAA perspective, is to have that centralized level of logging in place. So we use a cloud-based solution that we can archive stuff off to them. We're not paying for storage on site. We're just paying a monthly fee. So there's certain ways to work around that. But again, it's all based on what you feel the right fit is for your organization and where you feel the risk is to your organization. So.
Last question. Is cache data included? Like if you have a cache server and you're caching a query so that you don't have that logging cost?
Yep.
Does that have to be stored encrypted at rest?
Yeah, so the question was from a caching perspective, does that need to be stored in an encrypted fashion? We'll touch on some of that here in just a second. Justin's going to touch on it. But from a healthcare perspective, if any of that data can be used to identify a patient, then yes, you have to encrypt that. So I'm going to turn it over to Justin.
Yeah, so I'll just add there to that point, when in doubt, log everything, right? It's just safer to do that than say, oh, I didn't think I needed it. What sometimes happens is they will come in and ask you to pull a time slice, and you have to coordinate all these events, right? So what happened between 10:05 and 10:07, right, across all these systems? You have to show that potential lateral movement. So when in doubt, you log a lot of things. We're in the process now of trying to just deal with all that data. It's a lot, as he said, logging everything, trying to get through it. So we kind of have ours in stages. So we have 90 days of active logs that I can search at any point. And then I move that off to S3 after 90 days. And then we're moving it to Glacier after that. So we're kind of putting them back in cheaper storage and slower retrieval if we need to pull something way back. There are a million solutions for that. This is one that we're trying to see how it works. But to be honest, it's a constant battle in HIPAA. And you never want to be like, yeah, I'm definitely sure this is the right way, because you don't really win. You find out from OCR what they interpret HIPAA to be. So you want to just make sure that you've got the log. I can always go get it. I can always go back and get that data. So I'd rather have it than not have it. You had a question? Mm-hmm.
All data, so you have to think about what am I going to do here and there, set it up, basically all of your tables.
Yeah.
And, set it up.
Correct. Yes. Mhm. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So you were talking about in SQL Management Server. There's some.
Now, SQL Server itself, there are efficient mechanisms to do that kind of logging effort, more efficient triggers.
Okay.
And it's something to bear in mind if you're not using those kind of mechanisms, because they alleviate the programming task of tracking that stuff. And since it's built into the server, it's more efficient.
Sure. Okay, yeah, so what he said there was in SQL Server, there's built-in things to help you log and track all that data, and that access a lot easier than writing it yourself or coming up with another solution. So just in case somebody couldn't quite hear that there. Do you have a question?
Just to be clear, you had an excellent point in terms of when in doubt, log it.
Yes.
Also, encrypt everything.
Yep. Yes.
Including your logs in transit and in storage, because if you are querying a database, not just the result is going to have PHI information in it, but the query itself probably contains PHI.
Correct. Yeah.
Very careful about it.
It is. The minute you say the word HIPAA, the costs just go through the roof because everything gets more complex. It gets harder to do and all that. And again, we started with that disclaimer at the front. You have to make that decision and take that risk for your company and decide what you'd like to do. Okay. We can go deep in the weeds. We did not want to go super deep in the weeds here. We just wanted to kind of have a general overall statement, knowing that not everybody here has to deal with HIPAA, and be lucky that you don't have to deal with it. But we'll just go through these requirements real quick just so we can kind of knock these out. First things first, if you have an Amazon account and you're dealing with any PHI, it has to be designated as a HIPAA account by AWS. That's just a simple thing with customer service. They flag the account that it's a HIPAA account. That's kind of step one. You must sign a BAA with Amazon. They'll sign it. You just email them, say, hey, I want a BAA. They'll send it over. You sign it, send it back. It's done. Okay. There's details in the BAA that we'll cover in the next couple slides here. Customers may only store, process, or transmit ePHI through eligible services, and I bolded eligible services. We'll get to that in the next slide. Not every single thing Amazon brings out you can use. Okay. Must encrypt ePHI in transit and at rest. As he said, it should be encrypted all the time, every time, right? It's an increased complexity, but the better default is encrypted. You must use dedicated EC2 instances for processing, storing, and transmitting PHI. So right out of the gate, my instances now cost 20% more than they do on shared. Right out of the gate, okay? Oh, and by the way, you can't use the T2 class of instances. They don't count for dedicated. So there we go. Now I'm in the next level. I'm in the M class, or the C class already. Must record, retain activity to use and access to PHI. Again, log everything, okay? Unique user identification required, no shared accounts. Okay? Unique accounts have to be used for everything. Certain services, not AWS, but certain other applications do have a single login. They maybe only allow you to have one for your account. Then you have to have a log of that activity and who used it when, okay, to handle that. Strong authentication required. Strongest password complexity you can have. Password resets. If two-factor or multi-factor supported, you need to have that turned on as well. Again, do everything to the fullest degree you can do when you're doing this. Very good. Okay, so the HIPAA eligible services. This is as of when we built the slide deck a few weeks ago. Yesterday. So Amazon API Gateway, Direct Connect, Snowball, DynamoDB, EBS, EC2, EMR, ELB, Glacier, RDS. Notice that the RDS is just MySQL, Oracle, and Postgres, so not every engine is supported.
Postgres just came out like a month or two ago, maybe?
Yep, Postgres is relatively new. Amazon Aurora for MySQL, Redshift, and then S3. Okay, so great. Now Amazon's got, I don't know, they probably released 5 services since we started this talk, but out of the 80 or so they have, you can only use 13 to store or transmit PHI. Right, so that limits the scope now of what I can do. I don't get to play with the cool stuff that comes out. I have to wait. Okay, and this is in the BAA. So if you don't read the BAA but you sign one and you're using one of those services, then you're kind of stuck. Okay. Question? Somebody have a question?
Of course, you can put anything you want in a VM. So does that mean that if you use the SQL Server, you have to basically be running your own VM when there's a SQL Server?
Yeah. So.
Is it support the RDS?
Yeah. So you're using EC2 then to do that, and that's okay. Yep. Mm-hmm.
As an example, before Postgres was like RDS,
Absolutely, and just to repeat what Anthony said there, so what we were doing previously and what we're doing still today at the moment is our Postgres instances are running on EC2 because EC2 is not supported in RDS. We're now trialing RDS for Postgres so we can start getting to that, moving to that method at some point. But we had to wait. It was unfortunate because RDS is great and Aurora is great, but we have to wait to move to those. Okay.
One thing I would point out.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one other thing to point out too, there's a couple things in here that even there's some guidance that AWS will give you on. So for instance, the ELBs, right? You terminate SSL at your load balancer, and then you use HTTP internally and connect to a web server. You got a problem. Reason being, that's not encrypted from your load balancer to your web server. It's technically unencrypted internally, and if you're transmitting PHI, it becomes a problem. So there's certain other gotchas in here that you have to understand the rules and the regulations and kind of how it's written to make sure that you're complying. Because even though Amazon will say, okay, you can use the ELB, you have to know truly what that means and what they want you to do from an architecture perspective. And secondarily, Amazon's actually put out a series of good webinars and white papers on architecting for HIPAA compliance or compliance in general. I've got a couple of them linked in the end of the slides here, but that's just one of those things that they talk about as part of the architecting for compliance, making sure that, yes, we say you can use these things, but ensuring that you have taken the appropriate steps to secure them the way that they basically require. So.
This last slide here, or the next slide that we have, this is the shared responsibility model. I'm sure all of you have it memorized, being AWS users, correct? Right? No hands? Oh, got one hand, okay. Basically what this means is if their data center didn't get breached physically or the metal didn't break, then that's their problem and the rest is yours. You get all the hard stuff, they get the pretty easy stuff, right? So as you can see there, your data, your platforms, applications, identity and access management. If you're not using IAM properly, which is hard to do because it's very complex. Operating systems, networks, firewalls, all the difficult stuff is on your side of the house. Okay, so again, they're going to point to this. So if there is any potential ePHI issues, they're going to point to this model from an AWS perspective, from the BAA, and say, that was on your side. It's up to you to talk to OCR. The good thing about the BAA and the reason why they're important is because if there was a breach, so let's say the data center E1 in Northern Virginia got breached physically and data was stolen. With the BAA in place, Amazon is now in the boat with us to deal with that breach, the costs, the whole bit. Having the BAA in place, and as long as both sides are following their part, they're legally liable as well, according to whatever is written in the BAA. Okay? If you're not following for any reason, then they're like, I'm out, and it's just on you. So BAAs are super important, and following them to exactly what they say is more important, because if you don't follow it, the paper's useless, basically. Okay? Nope. You're still there, yeah.
And two things, right? One, so that the statement was that they're in the boat with you, but they're only in the boat with you so fast as they can bail and find a good lawyer to tell them why they're not in the boat with you. So keeping that in mind too, making sure that your BAAs make sense for your organization, you've had them reviewed, you've had it looked at. In Amazon's case, they're going to send you theirs, and they're not going to allow you to redline much. So just be aware of it. But a couple things I wanted to add in here just as resources. First and foremost, AWS maintains a compliance portal. So if you have any compliance-related questions, concerns, you have random, if you're in the EU with GDPR that's coming online, then you have to comply with that. They have information out there about what you need to do to comply with those certain rules and regulations and how they maintain it. The shared responsibility model, that graciously stolen slide that we just looked at, not just that, but the image, but there's also a series of information regarding what the shared responsibility model is. That goes for any piece of security, not just compliance or otherwise inside AWS. They're literally telling you what you are responsible to do. So as an AWS consumer, what do you have to protect and what's your responsibility? So just in general, it's something good to check out. Yes?
What about the Gov Cloud portion of AWS? I thought I heard some companies use that for Relay.
Yeah.
More secure generally.
So the question was, what about the Gov Cloud piece of AWS? I don't personally know because I haven't looked into it. My guess or my assumption is that they are just like you term a an account a HIPAA account, you would have to term an account a government account, and then focus in that space. But to be honest, I have not looked into it, and I've not personally used it, so I can't really say. Yeah, they're covered under FedRAMP, which is a whole other set of standards that they have to comply with. Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know on that one, so. Right. Well, just like we said before, right? The minute you throw healthcare or government in there, they think, unlimited money. You can pay.
I couldn't even imagine doing that. Government and healthcare together, that would be rough.
Yeah. So, is there a question?
Are you had your quota?
Yeah.
No, it resets.
He let us go 2 slides. It resets. Quota resets.
Have you read the rules? It was on the previous slide. Can I assume that these slides are going to be online?
Yes, we're going to share the slides. Okay. A couple other links in there just for reference. The HIPAA compliance link goes directly to the compliance portal page for HIPAA. The 2016 AWS blog series, Automating HIPAA Compliance. This was a pretty interesting one. It talks about using CloudFormation templates and basically how you, if somebody spins up a VM that is non-encrypted, doesn't meet your requirements, it just gets killed. So piss your developers off, unfortunately. But it's a way to make sure that you don't do something wrong that will get you in trouble. Posted another link to the reInvent 2016. I'm going to be honest, I hate the word DevSecOps, but so be it. Embracing DevSecOps while improving your compliance and security, agility, and posture. That's a 1-hour-long webinar that if you are doing anything in AWS related to security, if you just want to look at how to improve, that's a really good one to check out. I'd highly suggest it. I can't remember the presenter's name, but it was a combination between I want to say a healthcare agency, but it wasn't. It was probably a financial services agency and an AWS architect. And they went through just the pros and cons of doing different things and just what worked best for them. So it was really a deep dive technical review of what to do. A couple of non-Amazon things. So for anybody that's familiar with it, NIST released their cybersecurity framework, basically stating how you identify, protect, what's the 3 or 4 other ones? Basically identify, protect, contain, respond, eradicate for those different pieces of the framework. So from a HIPAA perspective, all the different controls and things that are required, they mapped that to NIST and said, here's what you can do from a NIST cybersecurity framework perspective to map that across and be able to leverage just the NIST framework instead of trying to specifically target things in HIPAA. And secondarily to that, I've been a big fan, especially having been a consultant before, of the Cloud Security Alliance's Cloud Controls Matrix. If you've never seen that, they basically took what was a large paid-for product that a company came out with a few years back, where they took the time to make a big, massive Excel spreadsheet and map every single requirement you could think of from a compliance perspective and security perspective down to individual, like what they titled them. And then what that did is you could map, like if I implement this control, I'm now mapped to HIPAA, HITECH, PCI, NIST, ISO 27001, all of the different frameworks that might be out there. So if you're just getting started in some of that and trying to figure out, like if you already have policies and procedures that map to ISO, you might already be knocking some other things down. So just something to look at there is a really good resource, free, open to the public, available, community supported. They take feedback. So a really good piece of the puzzle to look into if you have not looked into that already. So other than that, there's our contact information. Any other questions, concerns, issues?
So I think this is good news for me, but just because you're doing something in the healthcare provider's network, it's not necessarily means PHI.
So the question was, just because you're doing something in a healthcare provider's network doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing something with PHI. That's correct. However, it's on pretty much that organization to know what they're providing you, right? So if you're a consultant for us and I know that you're just doing, server work, that's great, as long as I know you're not touching a server that could maintain or contain PHI. Because if I give you administrative access to it, that means that you have keys to that system, right? So if you have keys to that system, if you inadvertently, not intentionally, but inadvertently access PHI, that's actually termed a breach under HIPAA. And anything, well, here's the other piece. Anything from a HIPAA perspective, if you have access to over 500 records or breach over 500 records, that's a reportable finding to the Office of Civil Rights. So it's not fun. But to answer your question, as long as you are aware, or at least the organization that you're working for is aware of what they're providing you, then you should be okay. I'm going to caveat that and caution that with, that also depends on what you've put in place from a legal perspective, contractual agreement perspective. In that case, I would hope that that organization has taken steps to potentially segregate out and know what systems and pieces of their network have PHI and what don't. Because I get blamed a little bit for taking the overly cautious side of things. Anthony can attest to this for me. But we really try to, if anybody's going to be in our system, on our network, have access to AWS, really try to get that contractual language in place to have a subcontractor business associate agreement. So even if there's an inadvertent disclosure, we're not at risk of an issue, because we can then request from you to delete that. If you confirm delete of it, we can show that it's only been seen by one person. It's not been modified or altered or used. There's some things from a legal perspective that you can do to I don't say true up, but to fix the issue without it being a reportable breach. But that's where you get a lawyer involved. Yes?
What are your responsibilities for reporting?
So,
Breaches, or if you suspect a breach occurred with somebody you're contracted with?
yeah, so I'm going to have to point you to OCR and HHS's website on that one, because they have defined criteria of what they term breaches. Again, if you believe you've had an issue or an incident, find a lawyer that specializes in HIPAA and work with them, because they will be the ones to determine what do you have to do, what do you not have to do here. I don't want the liability on me to be the one to make that decision. And in certain other cases, not necessarily healthcare, not necessarily here, but I've been involved in those legal discussions from a forensics perspective. And my goal from a forensic investigation perspective is always to provide the information I know. And that's it. I'm going to let the lawyers talk about what they want to do with it. So, Anthony.
I think maybe along those points, like earlier, you kind of said, all right, you only get, kind of investigated after a breach, like
Yeah.
not before a breach. Like it would be prohibitively expensive to audit everyone,
Yep.
things like that. Then the other thing is based on how negligent you were. Like say you didn't have a BAA, or you didn't, do any of these encryption at rest, and you're just exposing patient data, right? That's a huge. That would be a bigger fine.
Yep.
Hey, we're doing all the right things. It just happens that there was a 0 day on this one server that was, unpatched. That I'm just giving like random examples.
Yeah.
Of, like, the more cautious or the more kind of steps you take, I guess, then it's like you give a more defensible position.
Right. So the statement was basically made that the more that you can do organizationally, right, from a proactive perspective, the better off you're going to be. So currently OCR is not necessarily going out and saying, hey, Mr., in our case, OurHealth, we're coming in to do an audit next month, be ready, right? They're starting to. They've started to. They have started to as of a few years ago. Yep. So, right. So that Anthony's point is his position, not OurHealth's. But no, yes. To your point, sorry. They have started to. They've started to come out and say we're going to do some proactive audits and see what you're doing. I can't say how they're making those decisions or what they're doing, but they are starting. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so it's risk-based, and there's $4 million for the government to spend on doing audits, so take that for what it's worth and see what you think they're going to do. Other questions? Great. Well, thank you all very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to us drone on for a little while. This was a great time talking with you, and look forward to the next one.
All right, thanks, Justin and Noah. If you guys have any questions, their contact information is up here on the screen.